Welcome back to Tech Talk. Recently, through its actions, Microsoft's been telling us that any PC that's too old for Windows 11 is essentially useless and destined for the scrap heap. Well, today I'm going to introduce you to this PC. It is my late father's computer. It is a Dell Inspiron 580, and it has got a rocking Core i3 550 CPU in it. Yes, that is a first-generation Intel Core i3 processor. Now, this was obviously a budget PC when it was new, and when was it new? Well, the build date on the sticker on top says this computer was built on December 28th, 2010. So yes, it's coming up to its 15th anniversary here in pretty short order. Now, on top of that Core i3 550, it's got 6 gigabytes of RAM and it's got integrated graphics, and that's pretty much it. Now, this is the kind of computer you're going to find in recycling centers and thrift stores all over the place, and its commercial value right now is pretty much zero. So today what we're going to do, we're going to put Linux Mint in this thing, and we're going to see if it really is useless. What is a machine like this capable of in 2025? Is it ready for the scrap heap? Or is there a use case for this computer where it could still be brilliant and it could be appreciated by the right user? We're going to find out all about that right now, right here on Tech Talk. Before moving on though, I thought maybe what I'd do is just introduce you to my late father. Now, back in the early 50s, my dad was a Royal Canadian Air Force pilot. He flew Harvards, T-33s, and CF-100s. After getting out of the Air Force, he went to the University of Toronto and became a chemical engineer. Now, he had a lifelong career in the pulp and paper industry right up till his retirement. But despite his career success, he was always super interested in computers. He was the inveterate computer hobbyist. In our family, we got our first computer in the early 1980s. It was an Apple II Plus with not one, but two 5¼ floppy drives. That was the hot setup back then, believe it or not. After that computer, I think there was an IBM PC-XT and a whole host of other machines. My dad was super keen on programming and learning everything he could about computers, and that kind of rubbed off on myself as his son. And it was just interesting to see how throughout his whole life, he always maintained that interest in all things computing. This machine that we're working on today, I got out of his place after he passed away when I was helping my mom clean out. And it's the last desktop computer he ever owned. It's a Dell Inspiron 580 with an i3 550 processor, 6 gigabytes of RAM. So this is a machine I'll probably own for life, as it was my dad's last computer. And I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's a pretty cool story for this machine. So why are we even talking about this old decrepit computer anyway? Who cares about old PCs? What difference can it possibly make? Well, as hobbyists, I think sometimes we get caught in the trap of looking at the world just through our own eyes. And because we're hobbyists, because we're enthusiasts, it's probably fair to say that the vast majority of us have at least a little bit of money to spend on our computing hobby, don't we? That's why we're so interested in the latest CPUs, the latest GPUs, power supplies, cases, is because either we have the money now to spend on that stuff, or we're pretty confident that sometime down the road we'll have the money to spend on that stuff. So either way, at some point, we're pretty comfortable that we're going to have money to spend on our computing hobby. But we forget, I think, that all over the world there are millions and millions of people that aren't as fortunate. They do not have money to spend on technology. They're struggling to get by, to make ends meet, to pay for food, clothing, and shelter. And this is the farthest thing from their mind. And this isn't just people living, in the far distant corners of the world. This is people in North America, people in Europe. This is people in our own communities. Now, interestingly, one of the ways we recognize is a great way to lift yourself out of poverty is to become familiar with technology. Studies have shown over and over again that people that have access to technology, that have learned how to use technology and have developed technological skills generally do better economically than people who don't. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there where we have a lot of people who simply can't afford to spend money on technology, but if they could, it would help to make their lives better. The truth of this is shown in organizations that exist to really help low-income and struggling families have access to technology. And I'm on the website here of the Electronic Recycling Association here in Canada. The ERA operates in cities all across the country, and their whole focus is to have donated computers that are recycled and refurbished and made available to community organizations and individuals to help disadvantaged folks get access to technology. And if we scroll down on their website, there's a great statement they make under this heading, "Give new opportunities in the most secure way," that I think really strikes the point home of what they're trying to accomplish. And it reads, "They're viewing regular access to a personal computer as a non-essential luxury is a thing of the past. Even basic activities now require the use of a computer. Applying for a job, completing schoolwork, staying in touch with family, or even something as simple as looking up a bus route is difficult without a computer. The Electronic Recycling Association has developed a charitable computer donation program to address exactly that problem." So yeah, this is a real thing. The idea of helping folks who are struggling economically have access to technology isn't something that is kind of way out there. It's widely accepted that this really benefits people in the community. And I think this is one of the things I find so irritating about Microsoft's move in canceling support for Windows 10 and forcing Windows 11 to be acceptable only on newer PCs. And that is people that make use of these programs, people who are struggling economically, Microsoft is basically telling them, well, you don't matter. Your older PC that you may be holding on to because it's all you can afford, or your older PC that you got through a donation arrangement, it doesn't deserve to have an updated, secure operating system. You don't matter. If you can't pay up to afford something newer, then we don't care. And I think as far as corporate messaging goes, I think that's terrible. And I think as far as it goes, when we've got community groups that are working so hard to make technology accessible to more disadvantaged families, I think having that kind of message really rubs me the wrong way. And it's something that's been really bothering me of late. So that's why I kind of made this video, is because I want to show that these computers are not dead. These are not garbage. They shouldn't be in e-recycling. They have a place in our world. And when we think about it, so I got this PC from my late father. It's like I mentioned, it's about 15 years old. I just got the computer by itself. It had an old physical hard drive in it. Now, for somebody who's looking to put together a PC on a really, really tight budget where you don't have a whole lot of money to spend, you can find PCs like this at your electronics recycling center. You can find them at thrift stores, and they sell for virtually nothing. There's lots of people who'd be perfectly happy to give this computer away because they think it's worthless. If you do have to pay for it, you might pay 20, 30 bucks, that'd be about it. Now, to make this a functional unit, I think there's a few things you'd have to add. You need a keyboard and mouse, but you can get that at a thrift store. You can get that at a thrift store for maybe 5 or 10 bucks. You can get a working HD monitor at a thrift store for maybe 30 to 40 bucks. And you can get a brand new SSD, say one that's about 256 gigabytes, for maybe $25 through Amazon. So between the cost of the PC, the cost of the SSD, the keyboard and mouse, the monitor, if you're thrifty and you're working it, you could get this thing put together and functional for less than 100 bucks. In some cases, you could do it for way less than 100 bucks because a lot of people would be giving this away with a keyboard and mouse anyway. So this is the type of computer that you can put together for almost nothing if you're really to work at it. But the question is it going to be good for anything? So if you did put that bit of money in, let's say you spent 7 or 80 bucks to get this thing going, what are you going to use it for? Is it going to even be functional? Well, by the numbers, it may not look too optimistic. Let's go to the Passmark software website. Now, Passmark, they do benchmarking for GPUs, CPUs, etc. And what I've done here on their website is I've plugged in the Intel Core i3 550, and I'm comparing it to a much more modern Intel Core i3, the i3 14100. When we look at the stats, these look pretty similar. The clock speed for the 550 is 3.2 gigahertz. For the 14100, it's 3.5. The 550 has a TDP of 73 watts versus 60 for the 14100. But when we look down here to the very bottom of the page and we look at the CPU mark, the i3 550 has a score of 1,628. The i3 14100 has a score of 15,209. So the i3 550 is 89.3% slower than its modern counterpart. The other way to look at that is the modern i3 is 10 times the power of the i3 550. So that may not look optimistic, and looking at that, you might think this computer won't be good for anything. But what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at what I did do with it, and we're going to look at some real-time, real-life examples of what this computer could do for a family that's in need. Hang on, that's coming up next. So now you're probably wondering exactly what did I do to this old PC in preparation for this video? Well, it's true I didn't just leave it the way it came from the factory. When I first got this computer, it had an old, I think it was a 1 terabyte hard drive in it. No, it was smaller than that. I can't remember. It had an old hard drive in it, physical drive. And that drive made this computer so slow, it literally took 7 or 8 minutes to get to the Windows 10 desktop. So that hard drive came out, and I replaced it with this very small Kingston 60 gigabyte SATA 3 SSD. It was just an old SSD I had kicking around. I put it in there to fool around with this machine. I took out the stock Dell case fan, and I've put in an aftermarket fan from Noctua. I had to use a Dell fan in a different product because I was using a Dell case and the motherboard didn't like a non-Dell fan, so I stole that for something else. But outside of that, this computer is exactly the way it came from the factory. Like I say, it's got oddly 6 gigabytes of RAM. There's 3 2 gigabyte sticks in there. It's got the i3 550 CPU. It's got the stock power supply, stock everything else. It is just the way pretty much that Dell made it. Now what I did do is I've installed Linux Mint in this computer. It did have Windows 10. I've removed that and installed Linux Mint. The reason I used Linux Mint is because on my last video I used Ubuntu, and all the Linux Mint guys kind of yelled at me, man, you guys are brutal. So I figured I'd install Mint this time just to, get a little bit of peace in the comment section. So I'm using Linux Mint to take a look at what it'll do on this machine. And I've also installed a few applications that I thought a typical family might want on a computer like this. Of course, we've got the LibreOffice suite. We've got a web browser, which is Firefox, which comes with Linux. I've got a photo editing application on there. I've installed Zoom because video conferencing has become such a big thing since the pandemic. Kids in school are using it for courses. Families are using it to keep in touch with family members. And I've got Thunderbird email, which of course generally comes with most Linux distributions as well. Now what we're going to do is connect it to a full HD monitor, and we're going to see how it performs doing tasks that a typical family or typical student in college or in high school might be involved with a computer like this. So what we're going to do, we're going to put the cover back on the case, we're going to plug it in, hook it up to a keyboard and monitor, and see what it does. So that's coming up right now. For testing out this machine, what we're going to do is just record the HDMI out on this computer. So what that'll do, it'll let you see exactly how the computer is performing and how it's doing with the applications that we use. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to cut things for time. So where we're pausing to let something load, that's literally how long it takes for this machine to use these applications. So with that said, let's start off. I'm going to press the start button on my computer. I have it powered off right now. Let's see how long it takes to get this thing up and running and doing something useful. Okay, so we're just loading Linux Mint now. And there's our login screen. That wasn't too bad at all. Now I'm going to log in with my password. And there's my desktop. So let's take a look at some of the things a typical family or student might want to use this computer for. I think one thing they might want to do, obviously, is to write documents. So here we have LibreOffice. What we can do is open that up. We're going to start a new writer document. And what we're going to do is write my treatise. And what should my treatise be? I think it should be on something that's topical, that's current, that's on people's mind, that's maybe bothering a few people. So how about Bill Gates, Gates is a big, sorry, I'm a terrible typist, doo-doo head. I think that's a treatise we can probably all get behind given Microsoft's latest moves. So there's my treatise. Now, if I'm going to have a statement like that, I'm probably going to need a little evidence for it. Now, what should my evidence be? Well, I think a good way to prove anything is by having a high-resolution picture. So let's insert that high-resolution picture now. There we go. I think that that pretty much conclusively proves that yes, indeed, Bill Gates is a big doo-doo head. Of course, I jest. Bill, keep the lawyers holstered. This is either opinion or it's sarcasm. Either way, don't sue, okay? And no, I didn't generate that on Copilot. So here we go. I've done a document. I've got a high-resolution image. Let's save that. Let's see. We're going to go save as. We're going to put it in our documents. We'll just title it Bill Gates for the sake of my poor typing and time. There we go. So now we've got a document that we've put together using LibreOffice. So obviously you could use this PC for writing reports, anything you really want to do in terms of a spreadsheet. LibreOffice runs on this just fine. What's something else families and students might want to do? Well, you might want to go on the interwebs and enjoy your favorite YouTube channels. That seems like a pretty practical thing to do. So we're going to leave LibreOffice running. We're going to go to our favorite tech channel, and we're going to run a 1080p video. And let's see how it handles that.
Nicorette Quick Mist starts to work on nicotine cravings in 30 seconds.
And of course, we're going to have to endure a couple of ads before we get to the actual video.
Why does it say paper jam when there's no paper jam? Do you have a case of the Mondays? You used to watch.
I'll skip that. And here we go. We can see in the bottom right, this is indeed an HD video. And now we've got an HD video running and LibreOffice running in the background. And I'm sure if you watch that video, and clearly it's not having any problems with that. So handling media, surfing the web, that shouldn't be a problem either. What else is something that you might want to do on a PC like this? Well, let's first of all mute this. We're going to leave it running, and let's say we want to deal with some pictures. So let's go to our pictures folder, and let's open up a picture of my cat. And actually, let's open it up in Pics, because then we can do a little bit of photo editing. So we're going to go open with, down to Pics, and give that a second to come up. There we go. So there's my cat killing an artificial bird. And let's say we need to make some adjustments. Well, we can set the gamma a little bit up. We can set the brightness a little bit up as well, so it's way overexposed. We can turn the contrast way down, crank up the saturation to get some color, and there you go. So here we're doing some light-duty photo editing. Obviously, it's not the most complicated thing. It's not raw therapy, but certainly you can go and you can adjust your pictures, no problem. And I'm doing that while I'm running a 1080 video and while I've got LibreOffice running as well. What's something else we'd probably want to do? We might want to go to Thunderbird and check out our email. So let's go into our email client, which is right there, Thunderbird Mail. And let's see if Tech Talks received any mail today. If I was going to guess, I probably got a bunch of junk mail. Yep, there it is. A lot of junk mail. I do like Techspresso, though. If you're not signed up for Techspresso, it's kind of a cool little newsletter. But there we go. I'm also now running my email. So what have we got running? We've got running LibreOffice with a document. We've got YouTube with a 1080p video. And just to show you, yes, that is still running. We've got Pics doing some photo editing, and we've got Thunderbird doing my email. So let's take a look at how stressed this computer is. We've got all these windows open. It's doing all kinds of stuff. So let's go down, and we're going to take a look at exactly how much memory and CPU capacity we're using by clicking on System Monitor. Now, System Monitor comes up, and it shows us exactly how much of our system resources are currently being put to use. So here we can see, as far as memory goes, we've got 6 gigabytes of installed memory, and we're only using about half of it, 2.8, 2.9 gigabytes. Or a little i3 550 CPU, we're using about half of the CPU power running all that. So obviously, this computer is good for doing a whole lot of stuff that families might want to do. And it does it without really being too stressed out even. So let's close all these off. And what about something a little more modern? Let's fire up Zoom. And I've got my webcam set up here. It's an HD webcam. And what I'm doing is I'm actually running a Zoom meeting on my cell phone as I'm filming this. So what I'm going to do is join that meeting. Let's see how it handles this. So here's my login screen. I got my audio and video turned on. I can see my camera's working. We're going to hit join. We're going to get a little bit of reverberation on the sound here because the two are side by each. I'm going to admit myself to my meeting. And there we go. Now we are using this old computer on a Zoom call. So clearly it can handle Zoom no problem. As you can see, the motion in the video is just fine. The video is just fine. Everything's working. So certainly for Zoom, this is a computer that's more than capable of doing that. And again, and I like to remind you, 15-year-old PC that pretty much everybody would think is worth nothing. So what's the point of all of that? Well, the point is, you can see that all these applications that people might want to use that aren't gaming and aren't content creation, but are more your regular family student type activities, even very old computers can do all of this stuff on up-to-date applications and software. But there is a key here. The first is that I replaced that physical drive with an SSD. That's critical. If we still had a physical drive in here, you wouldn't have anywhere near the performance this thing is putting out. The second thing is we are using Linux. The reality of it is, even if I was using Windows 10, I don't think you'd see the kind of performance you see with Linux, because Linux is such a lightweight operating system. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It doesn't use a lot of resources. It doesn't have a lot of bloatware. It doesn't have a lot of unnecessary stuff going on in the background like Windows does. So an old PC like this, when you combine it with an SSD and your preferred version of Linux, it's a good computer. And I think Microsoft telling people that these computers aren't worthwhile is a huge mistake. Before I put Linux on here, and as much as I'm saying that, yeah, Linux ups the performance, before I put Linux on here, I did have Windows 10 on, and it worked fine. And I could still do all this stuff with Windows 10. Yeah, it took a little more memory. Yeah, it took a little more CPU. But all that stuff was still very doable, and it did it in quick order. Like, as you can see from this demonstration, I didn't have to wait very long for any of these applications to be usable. I haven't been standing here for hours, waiting for Zoom to load. So these are good computers. Don't poo-poo old PCs. For folks that can't afford better, that have to hold on to what they have, for folks that, in order to get access to a computer like we were talking about earlier, they may need to go to a thrift store, they may need to go to a recycling center. It can work. It can be useful. It can meet your family's needs. So this whole video has seemed like sort of a very long and in-depth look at my dad's old PC, but what have we learned from that look? Well, we've learned that computers have come a long, long way, and even very old PCs can be very, very functional and could be cherished by somebody when they're set up the right way. And to set a PC up like this to be fully useful doesn't take a lot of money. If you can grab one of these from a recycling center, you can get it set up for like $50, $75, $80 Canadian, and you'd have a cheap, cheap computer that you can do lots of good things with. Now, for families in need, a computer like this could be hugely, hugely helpful. And as demonstrated by our review of the Electronics Recycling Association website, there is a huge need for families in this country, in the United States, probably in your country, for inexpensive access to technology. Computers like this can fill that need. So that's why Microsoft's moves with Windows 10 and 11 are so frustrating. It's going to result in literally hundreds of millions of PCs like this being sent off to e-waste. And that's just really sad. It's sad and it's wrong. I think Microsoft is really underestimating the potential of this older hardware and this older equipment. I think, like I say, you set it up right, it could do a lot of good in a lot of different communities. Now, if you'd like to have an opportunity to get out of your own basement, maybe meet a few people in real life and develop some social skills, why don't you check out and see if there's a tech-related charity in your community that you could volunteer your skills with. You don't have to be a programmer or a computer scientist. Even as a hobbyist, you've probably got skills that could really help someone out, get them some exposure to technology that will help them improve their lives and maybe help them economically even. It's a great way to connect with your community, connect with your neighbors, and help out folks with something that you're already interested in. Could be a really exciting opportunity for you. Now, I hope you found this video either informative or amusing and entertaining, or ideally both. If you did, I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Again, I'm Graham. This is Tech Talk. We'll see you again.